The hum of the server room used to be my lullaby. For 25 years, the quiet thrum filtering through the walls of my office at Innovate Solutions was the sound of stability, of progress, of something real I had built from absolute scratch. Now, the silence in my own home office, a room I barely used when I was CEO, feels deafening, oppressive. It's the silence of exile. 3 months. It's been 3 months since the email landed in my inbox, cold and clinical, severing me from the company I considered my lifeblood, my identity. The sender, Mark, my son, the new CEO, the man I'd groomed, mentored, and handed my legacy to on a silver platter, trusting him implicitly. The subject line read, Organizational Restructuring, Important Update. Inside, buried beneath corporate jargon about streamlining leadership and pivoting towards new strategic horizons, was the brutal truth. My position as founder and chief advisor was eliminated, effective immediately. Security would escort me out by end of day. My access would be revoked. Just like that, 25 years of sweat, sacrifice, missed holidays, and poured-out passion erased with a click. I remember staring at the screen, the fluorescent lights of my office, the one with the corner view I'd worked so hard for, suddenly seeming harsh, accusatory. My hands trembled, not with rage yet, but with a profound bone-deep shock. It felt like the floor had dissolved beneath my chair. Mark wouldn't even do it face-to-face. An email, like firing a temp, not the woman who gave him life and the keys to the kingdom. The initial moments were a blur of disbelief. I reread the email, searching for a nuance I'd missed, a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a mistake, a poorly worded demotion, but the language was chillingly precise. Eliminated. Effective immediately. Security escort. No, there was no mistake. This was deliberate. Calculated. The betrayal felt physical, a fist clenching around my heart, squeezing the air from my lungs. I thought back to the ceremony, just 6 months prior, when I'd officially stepped down as CEO and appointed Mark. The pride swelling in my chest had felt almost unbearable. Seeing him up there, confident, thanking me, promising to uphold the company's values. I'd blinked back tears, convinced I'd done the right thing, secured the future. How naive I'd been, how utterly, devastatingly blind. That first hour after the email, I didn't move. I just sat there, the server hum a distant memory replaced by the frantic pounding in my ears. My coffee went cold. The photos on my desk, Mark as a grinning kid on my shoulders at the company picnic, Mark graduating college, Mark shaking my hand on his first day as an intern, seemed to mock me. Each image was a testament to a shared history, a bond I thought was unbreakable. Now, it felt like a lie. What had I missed? Where did this cold ambition, this ruthlessness come from? Was it the influence of his new COO, Richard Klein, a man whose sharp suits and sharper smile always set my teeth on edge? Or was this darkness always there, hidden beneath the dutiful sun facade? The security guard, a young man named Carlos I'd hired personally 5 years ago, looked genuinely pained when he arrived. Ms. Evans, he stammered, avoiding my eyes. I'm so sorry. They told me. I held up a hand, managing a weak smile. It's all right, Carlos. You're just doing your job. The walkout was the longest of my life. Down the hallway lined with plaques commemorating milestones I'd spearheaded, past the open-plan office where faces turned, eyes wide with shock or pity. No one spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken questions, with fear. What did this mean for them? If the founder wasn't safe, who was? I kept my head high, focusing on the elevator buttons, refusing to let them see me crumble. But inside, I was disintegrating. Stepping out of the building, the familiar glass and steel structure I'd overseen the construction of felt like stepping out of my own skin. This wasn't just a job, it was my creation, my legacy. And my own son had just ripped it away. The first few days were a fog of grief and rage. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house pressed in. Friends called, former colleagues reached out tentatively, expressing shock, offering support. But I couldn't articulate the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just business, it was deeply, painfully personal. How do you explain that your child, the person you loved more than anything, had metaphorically stabbed you in the back? Sharing this part is incredibly difficult, honestly. Reliving that initial shock, it still feels raw. If you've ever felt a betrayal cut that deep, maybe let me know in the comments. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone helps. It all started in my garage, literally. 25 years ago, armed with a computer that now looks laughably ancient, a second mortgage on my small house, and an idea I believed in with every fiber of my being. I was a single mother then, Mark just a toddler. His father had left shortly after he was born, leaving me with little more than debt and a fierce determination to build a secure future for my son. Innovate Solutions wasn't born out of a desire for riches, but out of necessity and a passion for problem solving. I'd been working as a mid-level manager at a large, inefficient corporation, watching them hemorrhage money due to outdated processes. I saw a gap. A need for intuitive, affordable software that could streamline operations for small and medium-sized businesses, the kind that couldn't afford the behemoth systems. The early years were brutal. 80-hour weeks were standard. I learned coding basics online, devoured business books at the library, and networked relentlessly at local Chamber of Commerce breakfasts, often with Mark asleep in his car seat in the corner. Money was incredibly tight. There were nights I survived on instant noodles, pouring every spare cent into development, into hiring my first programmer, a bright young woman named Sarah who still works at the company, or at least she did until recently. I remember the thrill of landing our first major client, a local manufacturing firm. I'd pitched them relentlessly for months. When the owner finally said yes, I cried tears of sheer relief and exhaustion in my car afterward. That contract was the lifeline we needed. It proved the concept, gave us credibility. Slowly, painstakingly, we grew. We moved from the garage to a cramped, rented office above a pizza place, the smell of pepperoni a constant companion. Mark spent many afternoons there after school, doing his homework amidst the clatter of keyboards and the buzz of programmers debating code. He saw the struggle, the dedication. He used to draw pictures of servers and call them the company's heart. I made sure he understood what I was building, why it mattered. It wasn't just about software. It was about helping other businesses thrive, creating jobs, contributing something tangible. I instilled in him the values that became the company's core: integrity, customer focus, innovation driven by real-world needs, and treating employees like family because in the beginning, we practically were. Our company culture was something I fiercely protected. We had summer picnics, potlucks for birthdays, an open-door policy that meant anyone could talk to me. We weren't just colleagues, we were a team invested in each other's success. As Mark grew older, he showed a genuine interest. He interned during summers, starting with filing and fetching coffee, gradually taking on more responsibility. He was smart, quick to learn. I saw so much potential. Sending him to business school felt like the natural next step, an investment in the company's future. Our future. My pride swelled when he graduated with honors. He came back eager, full of ideas. Initially, his energy was infectious. He joined full-time, rotating through departments, learning the ropes from the ground up, just as I had insisted. He spent time in sales, in development, in customer support. I wanted him to understand every facet of the business, not just inherit the corner office. He seemed to embrace it. He respected the long-term employees, learned from them, and brought fresh perspectives. We talked strategy over dinner, debated market trends. It felt like a true partnership was forming, the culmination of my lifelong dream. The decision to appoint him CEO wasn't sudden. It was a transition planned over years. I was nearing 60, wanting to step back slightly, perhaps focus more on long-term strategy and mentorship, leaving the day-to-day operations to him. He seemed ready. He had the degree, the experience within the company, and I thought, the understanding of our core values. The board, many of whom were old friends and early investors who trusted my judgment, approved the transition unanimously. The handover ceremony felt like a coronation, a celebration of continuity. I remember looking out at the employees, many of whom had been with me for over a decade, their faces beaming. I felt a profound sense of peace, of accomplishment. I'd done it. I'd built a successful company and secured its future with my own son at the helm. Looking back now, the warning signs were there, subtle at first, easily dismissed as youthful ambition or adjustment pains. But I was too blinded by maternal pride, too invested in the narrative I'd created, to see them for what they were. Perhaps that's a common failing when family and business mix. You want so desperately to believe in the best, you ignore the whispers of doubt until they become a roar. Thinking about those early days, the sheer grit it took, it makes the current situation even more painful. We built something special, something with soul. If you're building something of your own, cherish that soul. It's more valuable than any profit margin. Maybe give this video a thumbs up if you agree. The shift began subtly, almost imperceptibly, about a year after Mark took over as CEO. It started with small changes in tone, in meeting dynamics. He brought in Richard Klein as COO, someone he knew from business school. Klein was everything I wasn't. Slick, obsessed with buzzwords and short-term gains, dismissive of the company's history. He wore expensive suits and spoke in a language full of jargon that seemed designed to obfuscate rather than clarify. We need to optimize synergies, he'd say, or let's leverage disruptive paradigms. I found him abrasive, his focus solely on cutting costs and boosting quarterly numbers, often at the expense of long-term strategy or employee morale. Mark, however, seemed captivated by him. Klein became his shadow, his closest advisor. My own input, once sought after, began to be politely ignored, then openly bypassed. Meetings I used to lead were rescheduled without my knowledge. Decisions were made in closed-door sessions between Mark and Klein. The open-door policy I'd champion slowly eroded. An invisible wall went up around the executive suite. Long-term employees, the bedrock of the company, started expressing concerns privately. Sarah, my first hire, came to me one afternoon, her brow furrowed. "Elena," she began hesitantly, "Mark and Richard are talking about outsourcing a significant portion of the development team overseas. They say it's purely a cost-saving measure, but these are people who built our core product. Their knowledge is irreplaceable." I was stunned. We'd always prided ourselves on our in-house expertise, our collaborative R&D process. I tried talking to Mark about it. "Mom, you need to understand, the market's changing," he said dismissively, not meeting my eye, fiddling with his tablet. "We need to be lean, agile." Klein ran the numbers. "It makes financial sense. We can't afford sentimentality." Sentimentality? These were people's livelihoods, the very heart of our innovation. I tried to argue, to explain the hidden costs, loss of institutional knowledge, potential quality control issues, the damage to morale. He waved my concerns away. "Klein has it under control. We're looking at the future, not the past." That phrase, "looking at the future, not the past," became his mantra. A veiled insult directed squarely at me and everything I represented. Then came the changes to client relations. We built our reputation on personalized service, on long-term partnerships. Klein implemented a tiered support system, pushing smaller clients towards automated responses and offshore call centers. Complaints started trickling in. Loyal customers, some of whom had been with us since the garage days, felt neglected, unheard. I brought this to Mark's attention, showing him emails, feedback forms. "Growing pains," he insisted. "We're scaling. We can't hold everyone's hand anymore. They need to adapt to the new system." He seemed irritated that I was even questioning him. The atmosphere in the office shifted. The easy camaraderie was replaced by a nervous tension. People were afraid to speak up, afraid of being seen as not aligned with the new vision. Layoffs began, disguised as restructuring. Good people, loyal people, were let go with minimal notice, replaced by cheaper, often less experienced hires, or their roles simply eliminated. The company culture I'd nurtured for decades was being systematically dismantled. My role as founder and chief advisor felt increasingly hollow. Mark rarely sought my advice. When I offered it, it was often met with a tight smile and a, "Thanks, Mom, we'll take it under consideration," before he proceeded with whatever he and Klein had already decided. It felt like I was being pushed onto a decorative shelf, a relic of a bygone era. The pain of this slow erosion was different from the sharp shock of the firing, but it was corrosive. It was the dawning realization that my son didn't value my experience, didn't respect the foundations I'd laid. He saw me as an obstacle, a symbol of the old way he was so desperate to escape. I tried to understand. Was I being resistant to change? Was I unable to let go? I spent sleepless nights questioning myself, but my gut told me something was fundamentally wrong. The changes weren't strategic. They felt reckless, driven by ego and a desire to quickly make his mark, egged on by Klein's relentless focus on short-term metrics. I saw the growing disconnect between the leadership and the employees, between the company and its customers. I saw the foundation cracking. I remember one particularly tense board meeting. Klein presented projections based on aggressive cost-cutting and a risky new product launch that hadn't been properly market-tested. I voiced strong reservations, pointing out potential flaws, the impact on existing client relationships, the strain on our remaining development team. Mark's jaw tightened. Klein responded with condescending politeness, essentially dismissing my concerns as outdated thinking. Mark backed him up. "We appreciate your perspective, Mom," he said, the word mom feeling like a deliberate diminishment in that context. But the board agrees with the direction Richard and I are taking. I looked around the table. Some of the older members looked uncomfortable, but they remained silent, perhaps intimidated or unwilling to challenge the new CEO they'd just appointed. That was the moment I knew I'd truly lost control, not just of the company, but of my relationship with my son within that context. He was choosing clients' slick promises over my grounded experience. The writing wasn't just on the wall. It was being projected onto it in a PowerPoint presentation. The months leading up to the firing were filled with this growing dread, this sense of powerlessness. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash you couldn't prevent. The company felt less and less like the place I'd built, and my son felt more and more like a stranger. The day it happened, the finality of it was still a gut punch, despite the preceding months of erosion. That email, it wasn't just the content, but the sheer coldness of the delivery. No conversation, no warning, just a digital termination. I sat there, reeling, the words organizational restructuring echoing hollowly. My first instinct was to storm into Mark's office, demand an explanation face to face. But what would that achieve? The decision was made. The email was chillingly clear. He didn't want a discussion, he wanted me gone. Quietly, efficiently, like pruning a branch deemed unproductive. My pride, however fractured, wouldn't let me give him the satisfaction of a scene. I called my assistant, Clara, a loyal woman who'd been with me for 15 years. Her voice cracked when I told her, "Elena, no, they can't. How could he?" Her genuine distress was a small comfort, a validation that I wasn't crazy, that this was monstrous. "Help me pack my personal things, Clara," I said, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "Let's do this with dignity." We worked in silence mostly, boxing up photos, awards, mementos collected over a quarter century. Each item felt heavy with memory. The silly mug a client gave me, the framed first dollar the company ever earned, a dried flower from a bouquet the team gave me after we won a major industry award. Packing felt like curating exhibits for a museum of a dead life. Clara's quiet tears were the only sound breaking the silence. Then Mark appeared at the doorway. Not Klein, thankfully, just Mark. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a look on his face I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't triumphant, not exactly. Maybe a flicker of discomfort, quickly masked. "Mom," he started, his voice carefully neutral. I wanted to make sure you were okay." "Okay." The word escaped me, incredulous. "You fire me via email, have security waiting to escort me out of the company I built, and you want to know if I'm okay?" He flinched slightly. "It wasn't personal. It was a business decision. Klein and I agreed, for the company to move forward, we needed a clean break. Your presence was creating confusion about leadership. Confusion or accountability. Mark, what are you doing? Do you have any idea the damage Klein is causing? The people you're hurting." He stiffened. "Klein knows what he's doing. We have a vision. We're streamlining, making the company leaner, more profitable. Something you were always hesitant to do. Hesitant to destroy morale and alienate our customer base, you mean?" My voice rose despite myself. "I built this company on relationships, on trust. You're tearing it all down for short-term gains. You built it for a different era." He shot back, his neutrality finally cracking, revealing a flash of resentment. "It's my turn now. I need to run it my way, without you constantly looking over my shoulder, questioning every move." The rawness of it, the underlying accusation that I was somehow stifling him, stunned me into silence for a moment. Was that how he saw it? My guidance as interference? My experience as a burden? "So you fire your own mother," I said quietly, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a profound sadness. "This is your way?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "The severance package is generous," he mumbled, shifting his weight. "And your stock options are fully vested, of course." As if money could possibly compensate for this level of betrayal. As if that was ever my primary motivation. I just shook my head, turning back to the box in my hands. "Just go, Mark, please." He lingered for another moment, then turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Clara and the remnants of my professional life. The security escort, Carlos, arrived shortly after. He looked miserable. "Ms. Evans, I'm really sorry," he whispered as we walked towards the elevator, Clara trailing behind with the last box. "Everyone's shocked." "Thank you, Carlos," I managed. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into a new, unwelcome reality. As the doors opened onto the lobby, I saw a few employees gathered, their faces a mixture of sympathy and fear. Sarah rushed forward, ignoring the security guard. "Elena, this is wrong. We won't stand for it," she whispered fiercely, grabbing my arm. I squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Sarah. Just take care of yourself. Do good work." It was all I could trust myself to say. Stepping out into the bright afternoon sun felt surreal. The building, my building, loomed behind me, suddenly alien territory. I got into my car, Clara placing the last box on the passenger seat, her eyes brimming. "Call me, Elena, anytime." I nodded, unable to speak, and drove away, catching a glimpse in the rearview mirror of the glass doors reflecting the sky, swallowing up the life I had known. The drive home was autopilot. The shock was wearing off, replaced by waves of hurt so intense they were physical. It felt like grieving a death. The death of my company as I knew it, the death of the relationship I thought I had with my son. That evening, I sat alone in the quiet house, the boxes from my office stacked accusingly in the hall. The severance offer lay on the table, unopened. It felt like blood money. The climax wasn't a shouting match or a dramatic walkout. It was a quiet, cold, calculated excision. And the deepest wound wasn't the loss of the company, but the chilling realization of who my son had become. It's taken months to even begin processing this. Sharing the details. It's part of healing, I suppose. Maybe understanding how things got to this point can prevent someone else from experiencing the same. If you're still watching, thank you for listening. It means more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear how this story unfolds. The first few weeks after the firing were a blur. I moved through my days in a haze of disbelief and grief. The house felt too large, too quiet. The routines that had structured my life for decades, early mornings, strategy meetings, client calls, team check-ins, were gone, leaving a gaping void. I'd wake up with a jolt, thinking I was late for a meeting, only to be hit with the crushing reality. My identity had been so intertwined with Innovate Solutions, with being its founder and leader, that I felt utterly adrift. Who was Elena Evans if she wasn't the CEO? Friends urged me to take a vacation, travel, relax. But I couldn't. It felt like running away. Besides, a part of me, the part that still cared desperately about the company, was morbidly curious, anxious even, about what would happen next under Mark and Klein's leadership. Sleep offered little escape, often filled with nightmares of the company crumbling or Mark turning away from me with cold eyes. My appetite vanished. I lost weight. Some days, just getting out of bed felt like a monumental effort. The silence was the worst. I tried filling it with music, with news, but it all felt like white noise against the internal turmoil. The severance package sat on my desk, a constant reminder. Eventually, I had my lawyer review it. It was indeed generous, legally airtight. Mark had made sure of that. It felt like he was trying to buy my silence, my acquiescence. I signed the papers mechanically, deposited the check, but it brought no comfort, only a bitter taste. Slowly, agonizingly, anger began to replace the shock and grief. A cold, hard anger. How dare he? After everything I'd done, every sacrifice I'd made, not just for the company, but for *Kim. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a profound betrayal of trust, of love, of family. That anger became a catalyst. It wouldn't let me wallow indefinitely. I started forcing myself into new routines. Long walks in the morning, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my all-consuming work years, finally reading the stack of novels on my nightstand. I even started volunteering at a local nonprofit, mentoring young entrepreneurs. Helping them navigate the challenges I knew so well gave me a sense of purpose, a reminder that my experience still had value, even if my own son didn't see it. Then the calls started. Tentative at first, then more frequent. Former employees whispering updates. Sarah called late one evening, her voice low. "Elena, it's not good here. Klein is slashing budgets everywhere. The development team is demoralized. 2 more senior engineers quit today." Another call from James in sales, a man I'd hired 20 years ago. "Client retention is plummeting, Elena. Mark and Klein's new support system is a disaster. Long-term clients are jumping ship. They just don't feel valued anymore. Mark won't listen." Piece by piece, a grim picture emerged. Sales were collapsing. The risky new product Klein had pushed through launched with significant bugs, leading to terrible reviews and canceled orders. Experienced staff were leaving in droves, fed up with the toxic atmosphere and lack of direction. The leaner company Mark envisioned was becoming skeletal, losing its core strengths. Morale was apparently at an all-time low. There were rumors of heated arguments between Mark and Klein, though Klein seemed to always come out on top. Hearing about the company's struggles stirred a complex mix of emotions in me. There was sadness, deep sadness, watching my creation falter. There was anger at the needless destruction caused by ego and incompetence. And yes, admittedly, there was a small, grim flicker of vindication. I had warned him. I had seen this coming. But that flicker brought no real satisfaction, only a profound sense of waste. One afternoon, Sarah called again, sounding utterly distraught. They lost the Miller account, Elena, our first big client. Mark tried to smooth things over, but Mr. Miller said the service had become unrecognizable. He said the soul was gone from the company. The Miller account, the one that had saved us in the early days. Losing them felt symbolic, like a final nail in the coffin of the company I knew. I felt a pang sharp and deep. That night my phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mom, it was Mark. His voice sounded strained, tired. It was the first time he'd called since the day he fired me. Silence stretched between us. What do you want, Mark? I finally asked, my voice devoid of warmth. I heard about Miller, he stammered. Things are tough right now. Are they? I kept my tone level. Sarah tells me things are falling apart. Sales collapsing, key people leaving. Is that the new vision you and Klein were aiming for? He didn't answer immediately. I could hear him take a shaky breath. Maybe I made some mistakes. Mistakes? He called shattering my life's work and betraying his mother mistakes. The sheer understatement was infuriating. This isn't about mistakes, Mark, I said, the cold anger returning. This is about arrogance, about greed, about throwing away everything that made Innovate Solutions special because you and that parasite Klein thought you knew better. There was another long pause, then almost a whisper, Can you help? I don't know what to do. The request hung in the air, heavy with desperation, thick with irony. The son who threw me out, convinced he didn't need me, was now begging for help as his reign crumbled around him. Looking back, that call was a turning point. Not because I considered going back. That bridge was burned, but because it solidified my resolve to move forward, fully and completely on my own terms. My future wouldn't be defined by his failures or his belated regrets. It would be defined by my resilience. What would you have done if you received that call? It's easy to want justice, but sometimes the best path forward is simply leaving the wreckage behind. Let me know your thoughts below. And thank you truly for listening to my story. End.